Okay, so this is part 2 of chapter, oh, what is this, 38? Yes, part 2 of chapter 38. Um, so we're going to talk about shop rights a little bit. So when we're talking about agents, one of the questions here that we need to ask ourselves is if an employee or a contractor creates something, especially intellectual property, so a patent, a trademark, like a new drug, a new invention, a work of art, and they're doing it on the principal's time and at the principal's expense. At what point does it become the principal's intellectual property, and at what point does it become the agent's intellectual property? And so generally in shop rights, you're going to want to read the chapter closely to see some of the factors that were brought up. But generally with shop rights, if it's an agent and it's done on the agent's or the principal's time and the principal's expense, it's going to be considered the principal's property. In your quiz, you're going to have some questions about this, and we're probably going to go ahead and let the agent keep the rights to the invention if they're doing it using their own equipment at their own expense. And even if it's on company time, if it's outside of their job duties because their job duties are limited, we might still give it to the agent rather than the principal to the employer. Okay, so keep that in mind. Principal's duty. Oh, so we have some basic duties to agents. These are mostly ones you won't be tested on, but you need to at least know what these words mean for future chapters. There is one, though, that I wanted to bring up, and that's the duty to indemnify. Indemnity is a word that'll come up a lot in this class, so learn what it is. But it basically means to hold someone harmless. So if an agent incurs some kind of expense or is exposed to some kind of liability or lawsuit, but they're in the course of representing the principal at that time, generally a principal has a duty to indemnify them, meaning to either cover, using insurance or to reimburse or somehow cover certain types of liabilities like that. And then finally, the last bit of this chapter is about workers' compensation. So workers' compensation is one of the reasons why some of these delineations between independent contractors and employees are so important. If somebody's injured on the job in the United States, generally their claims are limited to workers' compensation. Okay, and that's if they're an employee. If they're an independent contractor, they're probably not entitled to it. But employees are covered by workers' compensation. So let's say I lose a finger in a work accident. There's a set equation for what that finger is worth in terms of weeks of work lost, and different body parts and different types of injuries are usually calculated in a similar way. Generally, that recovery is much lower than it would be if, say, I sued the employer to try to show that they had used gross negligence, and it turns out they were grossly negligent in how they were managing me, which is why I got the injury. However, not all accidents are because of the employer's negligence, or maybe that's hard to prove. So that's why we have a standardized system so that no matter what the cause of the injury, injuries on the job are covered, even though it would be a lower recovery than if the employer were grossly negligent. And generally, that's the only recourse that an employee has is through the workers' compensation claim system. They don't have an ability to sue their employer if it's classified as a workers' compensation eligible claim. And that is it for this chapter. We will have a little quiz for you here in a little bit, and then and that way you can get ready for your test.